I'm going to start this morning thinking about some of the universal values that are a foundation for world peace, and the UPF is emphasizing these. I think it's deeper than just kind of what the faiths have in common. It's not looking for some just crossover point. It's actually going deeper to what is, what are universal values, actually, with a faith or belief that there are such things. It's not that everything's relative and people can just choose their own values, or something comes really from an origin, and it's explained and introduced and developed through particularly the world's religious traditions and other philosophies as well. You'll find people on this search for what are universal values, and now is the time we need these more than ever. We're looking first of all at this aspect, we could call it the human factor. All institutions, ours included, they can derive their quality and character from the individuals who lead them. They may be set up with some very noble and beautiful ideals, charters, articles of association. Sometimes when you go back to these organizations, or even if you read the kind of Constitution of the United States and things like this, it's very beautiful. Really, you feel God-inspired words, but then you may say, well, where's the reality? Is society really modeling that? Is it really living up to that? That's a question, because individuals have their influence on these things. So an institution may be built on noble ideals, but they're influenced by the values and the integrity of those who make decisions. And always there's a kind of new generation as well that's being passed on. Every 40 years or so, it's going to a whole new set of people, which is, it shows the importance of education, doesn't it, right? But also, it's always a kind of little source of hope to me. If you think in the world, in 100 years' time, there will be a completely different set of people.
Amazing.
It's not the same people. So, then how are they educated? What wisdom do we share with those people as they're growing up? How do we, it also means there's scope for change, positive as well as negative, real scope for positive change when you think that way, right? So human character is shaped by experiences in the family, people's educational system, these kind of big, strong influences in our early life, and by social, cultural, religious influences. If people are part of a faith community, they're going to benefit from something, and sometimes it's not always benefit, right? They're going to be influenced in some way, and this is making the person, and it's building a person of integrity or not. So we're going to look at this process more deeply. It may strike you as kind of, odd thing to focus on, maybe, but this is actually very important in my life. So does religion have a contribution to make, right? I would like to feel that what I'm saying here, even can be acceptable to somebody with no faith, or atheist, somebody who's kind of strongly against, because even what I want to share is like learning about the religious perspective and what these ideas can mean, and what they mean to the people who accept them, and what they can mean to society who's looking for a direction, looking for a solution to many problems. So again, I'm not saying it in any kind of, hopefully I'm not in a preachy way, preaching, really. But I do want to talk about these things, because for much of our society in the UK, we're all here, these things are not really talked about or openly discussed, actually.
Yeah.
In America, it's a little bit easier to talk about these things, but then, is it so deep, or is it so, I don't know, I don't want to judge, but, to actually talk openly and deeply about these things is a little bit rare. And in school, it's less now than when I was at school, right? Much less.
Much less.
And so something is being kind of phased out of people's education and input in this country. might not be yours, but the next generation, what are they receiving? This is a very serious point, actually. And also we have to change the way in which we do it. There's a big reaction against kind of dogmatic religion and teaching and preaching and, in a way, understandably so.
Yeah.
But just to get rid of it is really, it's getting rid of the baby with the bathwater, that expression? Pull out the plug and
everything's done.
yeah. But so that's the danger. It's a kind of, it's removing something very, very valuable, even from young people's formation in terms of their character, personality, and integrity. So I would say true religious practice, it seeks to restore peace and it promotes certain things. This again is looking for universal values, and when you look at the world's religions, let's say, because there are so many different religions, I mean, California, we have a Church of Satan, so I'm not kind of including that necessarily, right? In London now, there's a service which is an atheistic, like a Sunday service, because people say, well, we like to come together and sing songs and have a message,
About not having love.
So there's all kinds of things. So what I'm really saying is, like, the break world's religious traditions. If we kind of think that way, then we're kind of trimming it at the seams, really. So I'm not being so universalistic that it includes, strange things, right? So certain things we realize are promoted through the stories, through the examples, through the teaching, through the Holy Scriptures, through the education. One is humility in front of God. It's like saying, I am not the most important person in the world. I come from somewhere, and I'm here by grace of someone. It's looking to that origin. It's respecting parents. It's encouraging and upholding fidelity in marriage, faith between people who are committed to spend their life together as parents and as husband and wife. It's valuing loyalty, and it's valuing the duties of public service. So even though family is important, we can't just stop there. Family is part of something bigger, our bigger community and our bigger world. Also, we see from the world's religious traditions the emphasis on personal discipline. Of course, you can get that from other areas as well, but it's talking about the inner life and establishing that kind of discipline, where necessary, some kind of sacrifice for a greater purpose, and controlling physical desires is a very common theme in serious religious traditions. It's how to kind of master oneself and impulses that one recognizes are not good or not helpful. And it's kind of making that decision and discernment about one's inner self and trying to get rid of certain things and emphasize other things, right? Very fascinating. And then you see different religious traditions, it's there. There's this, sometimes taken more seriously than others, even within the same tradition. So within Christianity, which is my background, there are some churches that emphasize just kind of belief. If you believe this, you will be saved. This is all you have to do. I would say, actually, no. There's a whole lot of practice in life, of doing, of what quality of action that you have to really consider as part of kind of remaking yourself and your relationship with God. So, and some traditions will, within that sphere, will emphasize that and emphasize it very profoundly. So there's a whole range, right? We see certain things are encouraged, like restraint where necessary, patience where necessary, forgiveness in relationships. Some of these concepts we'll revisit in our journey to think how we can exercise universal values in pursuit of peace. Religions emphasizing to love others as you love yourself. So to loving oneself, important. You'll have whole sermons and homilies and books written on that, and also, loving others in the same way, and love of neighbours, even love of enemies. We see this kind of idea cropping up, and very profound it is too. Another kind of feature of these presentations I'm giving today, I was thinking about this earlier, is I don't feel they're so intellectual, actually. Deliberately so. Because, we're going to talk about conflict resolution and this kind of thing. Well, you can do a 3-4 year course in university on these topics. Right? I'm sure go way more intellectual analysis and, tools to do that. I'm not going to be able to convey those things, but what we're looking at is something different. It's some kind of spiritual element which can even there get overlooked and ignored. So it's more like, even if you can't follow the thread of everything that I'm saying, I would say don't worry about that, let it wash over you. Right? Let it wash over. That's why the slides are quite important too, because it's kind of to do with a spiritual change. Right? And I've seen that in audiences, or specific individuals, and it's quite remarkable. Something can happen, right? So open yourselves to that. To help this along the way, one thing I'm going to be doing is showing certain quotations from religious traditions. Again, if yours isn't as well represented as others, please forgive me. I'm just trying to take a kind of selection. Right? There is more, there's much more that can be found, but I'm just selecting a few things, but deliberately, from different traditions. So UPF is not based on one tradition in that way. It's a gateway for people to come and cooperate and work together. So let these quotations where I show them, and some are from just notable individuals, not religious traditions, but let them again kind of just be absorbed, right? Just read it and take it as this is an inspiration, where we can see the connection between different traditions. This is kind of pointing towards the aspect of universal values, right? Because our world's religious traditions often grew up very separate from one another.
That's right.
And they started at different times and different ages, different cultures, and yet, some profound things are there in common. And traditions also have something unique, each has something unique to contribute. And rather than reject that, we like to accept that, right? And think that's helping us to have a broader, more embracing view and maybe even learn something. Right? So here's from the Holy Quran. It says, prayer restrains one from shameful and unjust deeds, and remembrance of God is the greatest thing in life without doubt. So these are illustrating this idea about the value of the religious, kind of looking into that religious path as a means for bringing peace. And again, this is an English translation, so forgive me if you're not happy with that translation, but it's offered anyway with good faith. Yes, and also you'll find in Buddhism, in the Lotus Sutra, beings possessed by carnal passions, anger and infatuation, have but to revere and remember the Bodhisattva Quan Shi Yin. Okay, each religion has its own very specific language and words, so we have to also kind of say that's fine. But it's talking about a kind of revealed God nature in a person, right? And they will be set free from their passions. So it's talking about the same kind of idea of inner self-discipline and getting over the kind of influences which are unhelpful and seeking help from outside. Buddhism is not a theistic religion in the sense that they won't talk about God, right, in those kind of terms, but yet is course, deeply spiritual and profound. Here's a quotation from our founder, Reverend Sun Myung Moon, and I particularly like this. He organized an assembly of the world's religions. The first one was back in 1985, so bringing leaders from different religious backgrounds to share together and to work out a path to peace in cooperation. Very, very amazing event and series of events as part of a kind of wider interreligious kind of agenda to mobilize and to utilize the depths of the world's religions to further peace. And I particularly like this quotation from his opening speech there. He said, "Religions should be concerned with God's will for world salvation more than with the salvation of the individual or the welfare of their own denomination. As far as I know, God is not sectarian. He's not obsessed with minor details of doctrine. We should quickly liberate ourselves from theological conflict, which results from blind attachment to doctrines and rituals, and instead focus on living communication with God."
Amen.
Well, this reveals something of his personal kind of philosophy, doesn't it? Right? And I think that's helpful. And continues to say, "In God's parental heart and his great love, there's no discrimination based on colour or nationality. There are no barriers between countries or cultural traditions, between East and West or North and South. Through interreligious dialogue and harmony, we should realise one ideal world of peace." Beautiful words, right? And yes,
If I that just reminded me of Imagine, John Lennon.
Same spirit.
That's
yes.
where he came from, wasn't it?
That's right. It's they're picking up on the same thing. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this is us. This is what we're doing. This is a large part of UPF's work, not everything, but it's a very important part. And you know that Father Moon's real desire, that hasn't been realized yet, but he was setting in place the kind of groundwork to have even United Nations have an upper house, like our House of Lords, an upper house, which would be the kind of great and wise religious leaders and scholars from all different religions who would be there to pool their kind of wisdom jointly and to influence the progress to peace. So recognizing that of all the people in the world, it should be people with strong religious understanding as well as conviction should be able to be at the forefront of peacemaking efforts and not adding to the problem, right?
Yeah.
So, it's easy to condemn the things which are not good in religious circles, but, again, it's bigger than a baby, let's not let it out with the bathwater, right? It's so essential for the future, and he recognized this. United Nations charter was written when, strong members were communist China and Soviet Union, these things, so they absolutely wanted God and spirituality written out of all the, articles, and, so it's writing out this whole kind of essential element of human nature and humankind out of probably our greatest kind of peacemaking effort of post-war years. So in one way, tremendously good, but also tremendously limited. Right? So how to remove that block? So we need to unite based on universal values. Right? So this just represents the different religious paths. It's not exclusive. There are others, of course. But to unite based on universal values, we can indeed look to values that are common in the world's great religions and philosophies. When we think about what do we have in common, well, here are some examples of people. just in case you've forgotten what they're like, But aren't they amazing, right? They are amazing. And these are deliberately kind of quite different looking people, but these are human beings, you know, and we're part of this very special family. We have a common origin. If we recognize that and accept that, then we can say that, you know, we are like one family, all people.
Yes.
We are one family under God. And when we're looking at religions, of course, referring to that common origin, you have different names, and Robin mentioned this. In the Universal Peace Federation, when we're talking about these principles, we are referring to, you know, everybody's understanding in this way, right? So just because I use the English word God, I don't feel put off, right?
Yeah.
But it's talking about something else, right? And that's something that even when I was a child, I remember people often saying, you know, oh, but your God is not my God. This kind of expression.
Terrible.
That used to hurt me. I used you sympathize. I see a lot of kind of nodding heads. But people often use that, you know, that kind of phrase. And I felt really pained to hear that. You know, this is not right. You know? How can you say that? I don't want to have a God that is not your God. For a start. Right? So, you know, we have to recognize this, actually. And that's why some study of world religious traditions, I think, is very essential and very important.
Yes.
You know, in our school system, to its credit, because I've taught in high schools in religious education, you know, they have quite a comprehensive study with very excellent textbooks of 6 major world religions. Right? So young people are exposed to this and understand this. It's largely, although it's not meant to be in theory, it's largely teaching about religion.
Rather than the act.
Yeah, it's not teaching to be religious in any way. Again, out of a fear that we can't teach people to be any one kind of, right?
Yeah.
Therefore, let's not teach them at all, you know, which is a disastrous conclusion, actually. We need to go more to the essence, to these universal values, and teach what it means to be, you know, a person who kind of recognizes the spirituality of life and the value of this kind of common origin which we have. So if that's left out of a person's development, you know, they're going to be having to discover this later in life, and that's also after the time when we're really forming ourselves as individuals. So, you know, we have these beautiful different words which we use. Again, even these words are the English words. Kind of, you know, very much filtered through everything like this, isn't it? But the point is, if we are one family and have one origin, then we have a common humanity. We are brothers and sisters. Now, this is one of the things which, you know, it doesn't take a lot of intellect to say that or to even comprehend that. But, you know, spiritually, to really feel that and to appreciate that and to live by that is something different, isn't it? Right? So it's simple, but it's profound. And
yes.
How many times do you meet that in your kind of religious life? You know, it's very simple. I've read this 100 times before, but I never realized. You know, I never saw it was saying this. Right? Now it's speaking to me. Right? I had an experience. It sounds a bit crazy, but we have a major textbook in our unificationist tradition because you know, it has its own theology very clearly and philosophy as well. These things, we're not delving too much into that, you know, just kind of tangentially here. But I was on a 40-day workshop in Korea, and we were a group of about 150 people. And we were told that like, for 2 or 3 times in the day, for an hour or more, we would read in unison from this book, right? This core kind of religious text. All at the same time and, you know, out loud.
Wow.
I thought, I'm going to go crazy. I thought, like the story Margaret told about this event in London, I was thinking, I want to run away. I was really thinking, but I said, hey, you know, you've come halfway around the world for this. No, before you run away, think about it, you know. Dialogue with myself. And, you know, okay, so I thought, well, let's go along with it and see. You know, this is often the way, isn't it, right? Well, So we read this through, and it was quite a sizable book, 400 pages or something. By the time we got to the end, my feeling was, wow,
Amazing.
this is amazing, right? Imagine your favorite religious or most precious religious text. You read it from beginning to end. How do you feel afterwards?
Great.
Wow. But then we didn't just do it the once. We did it a second time. After that, I found, wow! Amazing, right? And we did it second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seven times completely in those 40 days, right? By the sixth and seventh time, I was scribbling notes as I was reading, saying, I never saw that before.
That's right.
Which is, in a way, crazy. I'm underlining things and saying, who put that there? Because I've never read that before. And yet, my other mind is telling me, but you've just read it 6 times, recently. And I think, but that's what it is, isn't it? It's like, I read it, but I didn't read it.
It's like a awakening.
Yeah, exactly. I saw it, you have eyes, but you don't see. This kind of phrase, And that means there's something kind of dull inside myself, right? So by repetition, that's why religions use kind of mantra method. It actually starts to change something and reach a subconscious level, which needs to be stimulated and awakened and even changed. So it's very profound psychology at work in the world's ancient religious traditions, but for good reason. You read this thing you've read 100 times, but this morning, it just means something different to you. You say, aha, now I know what this means, right? So we need this kind of process. And I learned my lesson that way, I was just so surprised and so amazed. And then, had lots of notes to come back with, so anyway. How can we learn about our common origin? That's kind of a little bit what we're doing is concentrating on this, study of religion, scripture, and philosophy. Of course, to know our common origin and the world, we need to study natural world through sciences, and we need to put these kind of aspects of knowledge and seeking for knowledge in kind of different perspectives. So let's really think about that.